Okay, everyone, so can everyone see this whiteboard?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we talked about a couple of things, right? We established that, when we talk about straightforward names, there are sort of three acts when we think about it, right? We talked about I described it as a sort of even though it doesn't have it, but a 3-act play. So act 1, which consists of scenes 1 to 4. What we have here is that a couple of things. First is we don't like Blanche. Right? We in this block of time, we see her and all of her faults and all of her issues, we blame squarely on her, right? So we don't like Blanche. She appears to be a vain, selfish individual who is, highly and insecure, highly dependent upon men for her survival, right? Right? I would say she is, vain, insecure, dependent upon men, right? And while we don't necessarily like or even think fondly of Stanley for his behavior or from Stella for almost again, making excuses for Stanley's behavior, we're not on Blanche's side. Right? Now, when we think of the next act, right? So let's say act 2, right? And act 2 would consist of, what I like to consist of, scenes 5 to 6. Here, the purpose of this section is to gain an understanding of Blanche. Right? Now, Williams purposely does this by revealing and showing Blanche in a more vulnerable position, right? Up until this point, we see Blanche kind of being defensive, kind of on attack, right? Even in scene 1, she attacks her sister. She goes, "You left Belle Rev. You left me to what's going on, and I had to pick up all the pieces." Right? It's kind of a selfish position. She calls Stanley an ape, which he is, but is not saying, "I won't live here with you. I won't live here with that man hitting you." Or he doesn't take that kind of a stance. She just kind of says, "Well, we need a man to care of us." So all of her actions seem just oddly passive or vindictive or racist or all these other negative things. But we gain that understanding of Blanche, right? And it does so by revealing Blanche's insecurities. Right? I mean, specifically, when she's, again, scene 5, they're hanging out and, we see this, weird interaction between Eunice and Steve, which are the couple that live upstairs from them. Again, Steve has cheated on Eunice. Eunice is running on the street saying she's going to kill him, right? We find out later in that scene they're holding hands and kissing, and Steve saying, "Oh, baby, I love you. I didn't mean anything. I love you." That kind of love and hate, sex and violence that seems to permeate this neighborhood, that everyone thinks it's normal and doesn't react. We see that after Stanley has kind of told her in an indirect way that I'm coming after you, which again is another way of getting us to start to emphasize with Blanche, that Stanley is now targeting her, right? Before it was Stanley's annoyed by her, Stanley threatens her, but now Stanley's purposely saying, I know information about you and I'm holding on to it. Again, he doesn't just go out and say, hey, I found out about your past and I don't want you living here because I don't like that kind of woman around in my house. He basically tells her, I know what you did and I'm saving it, right? He's saving it for an occasion or for a time that he feels best suited to him to reveal and to blow up Blanche's game, right? But we see her insecurities. She talks about she's going to go out with Mitch, right? And she talks about her insecurities about her age, that she's not attractive enough, and that if she doesn't end up a relationship with Mitch, it's too much for it'll be over for her, right? Right? So, I mean, again, this shows us a different side to a woman that we've always viewed as kind of abrupt and kind of mean-spirited and, selfish. But she's literally saying, I'm scared that this is not going to work out for me. I'm scared that if I don't make this work the way it's supposed to, my life is all over. So it's meant for the audience to sort of gain empathy for her, right? Like, oh, we start to feel sorry for Blanche. Right. Now she does a really weird thing, right? There's this weird scene where, at the end, a young man comes in and she tries to seduce him, right? He's 17 years old, he's selling newspapers, and she says, oh, she's flirting with him in an inappropriate way. She says, my mouth, it says weird things like, oh, when he says, what do you drink to drink a Diet Coke? It makes my mouth water. Can you kiss me? I want to kiss you long and passionately. And she does. Again, just some random kid who comes to the door selling newspapers. And she makes out with him. She kisses him, right? And then she says something very creepy. She says, now I must remember to keep my hands off of little boys, right? Or keep my hands off of children. So it's like, oh, what did you do before? Right? It implies that she's done something else. But again, most of that scene is about us feeling sorry for her, right? Getting us to buy into what's going through and siding with her. It's about making us, empathize with her position, right? Now, scene 6. I have to put this here because I cut and pasted the wrong thing. So scene 6 reveals Blanche's past, right? Now it's an important thing because the scene 6 date it's not a good date, right? Stanley's a nice guy, but he's a bumbling, he's a bit of a schlub. And schlub, I mean, he doesn't necessarily know how to date, right? He doesn't know how to be sociable on a date with a woman. Like he tells her that he puts on like clothing because he sweats a lot. He asks her how much does she weigh, which in Blanche's eyes, you're never supposed to ask women her weight. He brags about his physical powers, like he's how strong he is, but he does it in almost a clumsy way. She kind of insults him by saying things in French that he knows he doesn't understand. Uh, you know, uh, he doesn't know how to operate. When he says, "I'll pick you up," and he picks her up, and she says, "No, put me down." He tries to kiss her. Blanche is like, "That's not what I want. I don't want you just to come on to me." He doesn't really understand. So we're looking at this sort of date that's not going really well, and we're thinking, "Oh, Mitch is still, this is still disaster." But then we get to know about her past. We get to know about the fact that she married her husband, a man, at a very young age. And she, again, this was expected of her at in her time, that she was supposed to marry a very young person, because that's just what happened. But what she did was, after they got married, she caught her husband and her husband's professor in bed together. They were both gay. And again, this is 1950s America. It wasn't, "Oh, I understand. This is just who you are. I get it. And, I'll just find someone else." It became something that broke her, right? And she just basically pretended it didn't happen, right? Which is, again, another theme we see in the play, right? When things are uncomfortable, these characters just pretend that things don't happen, right? Later, we know late in the play, when Blanche is raped, her sister just pretends, "Yeah, that didn't happen," right? "No, it didn't happen," right? "I know it happened, but I'm going to pretend it didn't happen." Here, she pretends it doesn't happen. They all go out to dinner, which is a very weird thing. And then she's dancing with her husband, Alan. And then as they're dancing, she says, "You disgust me." And when that happens, Alan walks away from her, and he has a gun, and he puts a gun to his head, and he shoots himself in the head. Now, a current theme that you'll hear people say, or her say, that she hears something called the Varuska polka, right? Which is the music that's played at the place where they were when Blanche said to Alan, her husband, "You disgust me." And the purpose of that song is, it represents a growing lack of control or mental instability within Blanche, right? She hears it when she gets stressed, right? Because it brings her back to this moment in time that is really, it's the moment that destabilizes her, right? I would say Blanche has always been somewhat fragile, and Blanche has always been had mental health issues, but this act really bothered her. It does so in many ways. It's because the act of her husband being with a man challenges her own sexuality, right? She doesn't grasp the concept that it doesn't matter, or her sexual appeal has nothing to do with her husband, right? She thinks, "Well, I'm not woman enough to do this, and therefore it's my fault," right? This also explains later why she has lots of sex with lots of men. It's not because she wants to. It's not even it's not even a situation where she feels lonely. She wants to reach out. It's really about establishing her worth, right? If men find her sexually attractive, then the Alan thing was an aberration, right? All these men want me. That means I'm wanted, right? Because she will take on Alan's homosexuality as it's her, and she made him this way, versus he's always been this way. So that kind of, her admitting that to Mitch, shows her being vulnerable. Her saying, "This is who I am. I'm not a perfect person. I'm kind of broken. Will you still take me?" And it kind of ends with hopefulness, where Mitch listens and is really nice. I mean, I've been kind of down on the play, and I do point the fact that in the play there are lots of issues with men and how they treat women. This is a part in the play where women are treated, or Mitch treats and respects Blanche in a way that she's not used to, right? And he shows that, hey, he's a decent guy, and maybe she's not completely wrong in choosing him as a partner, because he's probably not the love of her life, but he would treat her well. He would take care of her. He wouldn't be as abusive as Stanley, and he would attempt to give her the life that she's used to in the limited environment of where they live. So it's meant, this is a transition. This act 2, scenes 5 and 6 in the play is transition. It is meant to get you to say, "Oh, I get it. I understand Blanche's behavior. I understand her actions, and therefore, when she does things that are weird or what appeared to be offensive, they are reactions to an environment that she lives in. Okay, are there any questions so far? Does everyone know what I'm kind of talking about?
Nope.
You see, no questions or no? I don't know.
No question. No question.
Okay, because a little, right? So that's, let me just see if I can go. Now, for, this is recorded, so don't worry about writing this stuff down. It will be recorded. You can watch it later. And I'm just going to go to the end of the play as well, because we're here and it's a good way to sort of do it. And I'll give you the rest of the time for you to work on your projects. Act 3. Scenes 7 to 11. We are now on Blanche's side. Right? Okay, we empathize with her position. And we understand, we get a great understanding of her motivations, right?
Yeah.
So for grade 12s, remember we talked about the idea that we were looking at the story in the lens of there is an objective truth that exists in the world, and that Blanche sees the world through her own subjective perspective, right? That she purposely decides to ignore certain realities, right? Because she chooses to see the world in a very specific way. So for our grade 12 students, that's we start to understand that perspective. We understand her biases, her experiences, and her biases, experiences, and values and beliefs, and therefore, okay, we understand how she views the world. It's not that we accept what she does, but we understand. Okay, so in this section, when it gets revealed about when we found out Stanley tells Mitch about Blanche's past, we found out that Blanche, after her marriage, she then starts to have numerous sexual affairs. She loses her job because one of the affairs she has is with a 17-year-old boy in her school, and she's forced to move into basically a motel, and she becomes, for lack of a better term, I wouldn't say she was a prostitute, but she was known as, you would go to that motel to seek out Blanche for sex. And it got so bad that in the small town they lived in, they told her she had to leave. Right? Now, again, part of this is the hypocrisy of the time, double standard of the time. Again, Blanche is condemned for her sexual behavior, while Stanley has admitted that he's had sex numerous times and he doesn't get run out of town. Nothing happens to him. He's not punished or looked down upon, but Blanche is. So part of it is this sort of double standard where she doesn't get the ability to just have sex if she wants to. But we understand that behavior is based on her experiences, her values, and how she's been treated. So she feels that because her husband was gay, she feels that she's not worth anything. So therefore, the only way to prove that she is still beautiful and still attractive is to have every man want her, right? Which is probably the reason why she constantly wants people to give her compliments, right? And that's something she developed when she was a little kid. It grew up through most of her. She got married when she was young. It didn't happen the way she wanted to. So now she needs external validation of it. So we understand her motivation. So we see the world through her perspective. For grade 11 students, we're talking about how characters have motivations. We understand her motivations now. We understand her motivation for Blanche's behavior is, well, I want to feel that I'm valued for my sexuality or my beauty, right? Because all my life, I've been told that's all I'm worth, right? She grew up in the Old South. How pretty she was, how she carried herself, those were very important things. More important education, more important than anything else was, how do you your attractiveness, your youth is the most important thing. So she tends to hyper focus on that. So we understand her motivations, right? We get it. So the more and more things happen to her, the more and more we understand her viewpoint, right? And we understand what's going on. When she confronts Mitch, when Mitch finds out about her past in scene, I would say 9 or 8, where they actually have a competition about it, and he gets very upset. She says, "I don't want reality. I want magic." She says, "Yes, I know I lie. I know I know there's an objective truth and there's my truth. I prefer my truth because in my truth, I'm at least happy. I'm loved. I'm respected. I don't have to live by Stanley Kowalski's rules." Which, again, Stanley Kowalski's rules, Stanley Kowalski's society, modern society, says women are just tools for men to be used by men, and she doesn't want to do that. So we understand. So now we get it. We see her as a victim, right? And we are primed to defend her and have her back when Stanley assaults her, okay? Because at the same time, we've got Blanche's motivation. We also see Stanley in a more negative light. Right? Because also we gain understanding in of right? And it's happened in scene 8, right? When Stanley, Stanley has basically blown up Blanche's game. He's said, "I've told Mitch, it's Blanche's, you'll find out in scene 8, it's Blanche's birthday." And Stanley has specifically told Mitch about all of Blanche's past, and they're eating dinner, and Blanche is trying to keep the competition light, and she's trying to say, I've been stood up by my beau. This hasn't really happened to me. I don't know what's going on. And Stanley's eating chicken. He's just, hands and ripping me apart. He doesn't really care. And his wife, Stella, says, "Stanley's acting like a pig. Your mouth and hands are greasy and dirty. Go wash up." Now, when Stella says that, that sounds a lot like the values that she had when she first got there. Stella sounds a lot like Blanche, right? You are not having proper, you don't have proper table manners. You need to go and clean up. And Stanley just loses it. He smashes the plates and says, "Don't you ever tell me what to do." And in that scene, we get his motivation. Stanley is a scared man who's afraid of losing his power, right? And his power and that power is symbolized by his relationship with Stella, right? Stella abandoning her life and her values, which were similar to her sisters, is proof that Stanley is a powerful man, right? And every single time he's reminded of the fact that Stella might go back to the way she was, drives Stanley crazy, and he becomes very insecure and therefore becomes hyper violent, and his willingness to use violence. So we see one woman who does bad things, right? Blanche does bad things, but it's because she's a broken woman with some mental health issues who can't cope in a world where, that's not inherently not fair for her, right? She has sex with more than one person other than her husband, she's considered to be a prostitute, right? In a world where Stanley is a guy who's brutish, who's violent, who won't accept when he loses, who will eventually rape Blanche and get away with it, right? We see him operate in that world. And we don't have empathy for him because of his insecurities, right? So we see Stanley's fear and behavior and how he treats people. And we were like, that's not cool, right? Because it's coming from this level of fear where all he has to really do is just treat his wife fairly and they could have a good life, right? But it's not good enough for him. It's she's got to do what I say. In that same scene, when Stanley admits what he did and says and buys Blanche a bus ticket to go someplace else for her birthday, when confronted by Stella, Stanley goes, "That's right." He makes a speech about the fact. Goes, "Yeah, I was common, and I took you off and you came to here on your pedestal, and I took you off your pedestal." Right? He's saying, "I made you more like me, and I like that. And now your sister comes in here and ruins everything." Right? So that's his fear. That's his motivation. That's why he behaves the way he does, and that's why we're less willing to accept his behavior. Right? Because at the end of the day, his fear does not trump Blanche's personal freedom of her body and control of her body, right? So I don't care how much Blanche annoys you and how much you're afraid of losing Stella, you can't rape somebody, right? And he doesn't. So that's why, for me at least, the interpretation of Act 3 is there's a shift in personality. So we, even with the flaws of Blanche, say, Stanley, you crossed the line. Stanley, you're an insecure little man, and you took it out on this person, and now she has to deal with it. And again, we also we tend to be on her side because Blanche doesn't win, right? At the end of the play, the last scene, she is completely broken. She can't really determine what's real and what's not real, right? She's retreated to her own fantasy world because after the assault, after the rape, and we don't see it in the play, it's told off, it happens off scene or off page or off camera, for another term that people use, because when Stella and Hughes are talking about Blanche, they specifically talk about the fact that Stella says, "I could not believe what Blanche told me and still live with Stanley." So what she's saying is that when Blanche told her, "Your husband raped me," Stella knew that she could not continue a relationship with Stanley if she accepts Blanche's truth. So what she does is say, "I don't believe you," right? Which only compounds Blanche's sense of loss, right? I was assaulted, and my own sister, from what I can tell, last living relative, tells me, "I think you made it up," right? "I don't believe you," right? That's what pushes her for. So by the end of the play, we feel sorry for her. She's taken away by doctors to a mental institution. We feel sorry for her. And we feel sorry for her because no one goes to help her. Even Mitch is at that poker game when all this stuff goes down in scene 11. And you see Mitch is angry at Stanley for his behavior, but he won't do anything about it. He doesn't attack him. He just calls him a brag bull. But when everything goes down, he does nothing to make the situation better. So that's the play in 3 acts. That's the way you have to sort of think about it. And that's why we go from disliking Blanche to actually rooting for her. Okay, are there any questions about what I just discussed? Anything that people don't understand or are confused with? This is a great time to ask that question if you have any things you have questions on.
I think we're okay.
Okay. Anything else I need to say about that thing? Yeah, so keep those things in mind, right? And keep, like I think Kathy and I talked about the fact that Blanche really doesn't have, the play also doesn't even give us a redeemable male character, because Mitch, and you'll see this in scene 9, that when Blanche and Mitch have a confrontation, and Mitch says, he's rightfully angry, goes, "You lied to me. You lied to me." He says, you've been lying all summer. That when they went out, they always went out to dark clubs. She's always in the shadows because she was saying that she was younger, right? And Mitch goes, "I knew you weren't young. I don't even mind you being this old, but why are you lying to me?" So in scene 9, we do feel sad for Mitch, because Mitch is saying, "I'm angry because you're lying to me. You've lied to me the entire time," right? And Blanche goes, yes, I did, but I did it because I want you to give you the fantasy of the perfect woman in your mind, right? I want to do that because that's what men want. It's not the truth, right? So, and the truth is disruptive, and the world you ask me to live in is going to hurt me. So she admits all this stuff, right? Comes
Yeah.
clean. And then she says, Mitch, now I've come clean, be with me. Mitch says, and I quote, you're not clean enough to be with to meet my mother. And it proceeds to try to have sex with her. So Mitch, the kindest, nicest man we meet in the play, does the exact thing that Blanche says all men will do when they find out about her past, which is, oh, you are a
You're
quote unquote,
dirty.
yeah, you're dirty, and like, but I'll still have sex with you right now. Okay? If Mitch said to her, look, Blanche, you lied to me and I can't be with someone who lies to me, and walked out of that room, that's Mitch making a principled stand. Whether you agree with it or not, whether you talk about the hypocrisy of Mitch, who isn't a virgin, and expecting Blanche to be one, right? Or to not have any sexual history or past, that's problematic, and it's hypocritical, because if men are having sex with women and all women are supposed to be virgins, how are men having sex? Like, who's Stanley having sex with?
Women.
Yeah. So if Stanley's having sex with women, and we're supposed to believe that all women should not have sex until marriage, then the math doesn't work out. Clearly, because men are encouraged to have sex and to have lots of sex, but women are not supposed to. That's silly, right? It's a dichotomy. It doesn't make any sense. So if he took the idea of, you lied to me and I can't be with a liar, fine. Mitch still, I think, maintains his moral upbringing, and I'm a good guy. But the moment he hears this stuff and seems like he's so angry about the lies, but I'll still have sex with you, so let's just do it, and tries to force himself. But the difference between Mitch and Stanley is when Blanche says rape and get away from me, Mitch freaks out and runs, right? When Stanley goes to rape Blanche and she goes, stay away from me, Stanley goes, oh, you like it rough, don't you? And Blanche breaks a bottle and says, I'm gonna stick this in your face. And Stanley goes, oh, you want a little roughhouse, do you? And he overpowers her, right? He doesn't care, like, oh, you wanna fight? You want me this tough? And he's kind of smiling, like, okay, we'll do it your way then. Okay, like he's basically saying, I'm going to have sex with you. I don't really care, right? It's going to be the way I want it. So think about that that aspect of why we end up liking Blanche. That she has really literally nothing. Even the guy she thought she liked abandoned her. Sister abandoned her. Even society abandoned her, because what are they going to do? They're going to lock her away and say she's insane. And she's not. She's like, no, I was raped and no one's listening to me. I tend to think about this. Think about what's happened recently with Indigenous peoples in Canada, right? For years, there were Indigenous children were taken to residential schools, right? Stripped from their families, sent to a school to have them forget their Indigenous heritage and language and culture, and lots of children died. And instead of the system ending or the church and the government admitting that this has happened, they said either these kids disappeared or ran away, and they buried these young men and women in grave sites without headstones, and just pretend it didn't happen. Okay, like that kind of abandonment and that kind of thing, that kind of trauma where you're just abandoned by people and then told by others in authority, yeah, what you experience isn't real, is traumatic, right? So I mean, they're two different things. One's fictional, but I think the idea of being abandoned can be a traumatic effect on characters. So that's why someone could read Streetcar Named Desire and say, oh yeah, I get it, and get the link and make the connection to our real world where, when individuals are abandoned and they are forgotten and their experiences are devalued or not told that didn't really happen, that trauma becomes impactful on that person's mental health. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Right? Like if, if someone said, if I said, anti-Asian hatred isn't happening, you'd be like, what are you talking about? It's happening. No, it's not. It's not real. That becomes harmful because what I'm saying is your lived experience isn't really happening and you're making it, and you're probably making it up, and you need to change because that questions your reality. Like, do I not know what's going on in reality? Am I making it up? Right? Okay. We all good?
Yep.
Okay. I'm only hearing Patrick. Unless Kathy is basically controlling Patrick like a puppet, and just is doing it without moving her lips.
She's drunk.
I'm not
good.
drunk.
Yes, you are.
He said
No,
drunk.
you are.
What are you talking
Okay.
about?
So what I would like you to do is, like, whatever stage of the of the assignment you're on, you continue to work on it. If you give me 10 minutes, what I'll do is I'll pull you into a breakout room for Zoom, and I'm just going to check in to see if you understand the instructions, the videos that you watched. And if not, I'm there we can talk about it, and I can help you get started on the first stage. But even before I do that, I want to do one more thing that I want to do that I haven't done, that I needed to do. So I'm going to stop this share and stop this individual recording.